Get inspired. Get motivated. Light your fire. Create your life. This is Creativity Sparks Journal.
Hi, this is Tami-Patzer, and I am happy to have Angela Treat Lyon with us today, all the way from Hawaii. Angela is an Amazon best-selling author, painter, stone sculptor, and illustrator, and she's a host of Daydreamers Radio at idareyouradio.com. And what makes her extra special is she has published 50 plus books. Welcome, Angela.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me as your guest today.
I am really looking forward to finding out about who are you creating your coloring books for?
Oh, my goodness. Well, you know how they say, my books are for everybody. Mine are not. Mine are for older kids and adults and people who appreciate, a little bit of eroticism.
Aha. Okay, that should be an interesting conversation.
Well, it came about because somebody said to me, Angela, what are you going to do this different? And I had already produced probably, 5 or 6 coloring books already. And I thought, what could I do this different? And it just occurred to me that probably 2 years ago, I had made a series of books on the Japanese shunga erotic art. And I thought, how cool would it be if I did some erotic coloring book drawings? And so I did a series of, I guess they're mildly hot, and then there's a steamy hot. They've got some gay positions. They've got heterosexual positions. They've got people doing things by themselves. I mean, it's totally fun.
And are these particular books, are these available on Amazon, or where do you sell those books?
Well, Amazon has a strict policy against anything that's steamy, which is kind of strange to me because there are steamy books on Amazon, but they don't allow coloring books to be steamy. So I put them on lulu.com, and they're also on my website, which is coloringbookqueen.com. That's Queen, not clean.
Oh, Queen, like the Queen of England. Okay, coloring book Queen.
Correct.
Oh, that's
Correct.
really interesting. So those are that makes your work stand out, obviously. So are these designs, you're quite a prolific artist. I understand that you created more than 1,200 images in only 8 months. So how do you do that, number one? And are all of these already published, or are these for the future?
Well, you know how they say you have to produce 10 things in order to get one masterpiece? Well, I don't know if you've ever heard that or not, but in the art world, it's quite normal to do a lot of images before you get one that you really like. So when I started doing these coloring book drawings, and it was basically because I love to do black and white, I just thought, okay, let's just go for it. And I drew and drew and drew and drew, and I guess maybe 200 of them have been published. The other ones are sitting there that I don't like, or that aren't quite up to par, or that I'll use in the future.
So are these all hand drawn, or are you using a computer?
Well, both, really. I hand draw them in an app. But, the app doesn't help me draw them. It's not like this magical thing that you put your stylus down on the pad and automatically you get a drawing. You do have to draw. So I draw them in this app, and then I download them to my computer and I refine them in Photoshop. And it'll take maybe 3 to all the way up to 16 hours to correct it and refine it and change it and make it so that I really like it. There's quite a bit of work involved.
So when you do this, how many images end up in a book?
Typically between 30 and 50. And I'm told that that's excessive for what people really expect. But, 50 images on one side of a page, it's a 100-page book. That's not a very big book, really. They're 8.5 by 11, but 50 pages is, to me, that's not very many, but people say that's a lot. I guess the normal's around 30.
Well, when you think about the hours of coloring pleasure that you can get out of a book with 50 images, that would be really unique. And I imagine that you have quite a following of people who probably would collect your books too.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I do.
I know that if that was what I was interested in, I would, get every book from a certain author, illustrator that I could. Have you, I would think that your books would lend themselves to coloring parties or maybe not. I don't know. Have you heard of your books being used for family, well, maybe not family get-togethers, but for coloring get-togethers?
I have not, and I'm probably deficient in the area of connecting with my buyers because I'm too busy drawing.
Right. Well, I would think anyone over 21 would. I mean, it could be like a fun thing to do, maybe at a party. I don't know. It just. To me, it seems like something you could do at a party. What about, I've heard a lot of people, I've looked at coloring groups and everything, and I see that there's some people who are talking about grayscale art or white on black art. What do you think about those things? And do you do it, or what, will you do that?
I will probably not do grayscale because most of them are manipulated photographs, or else they're drawings that have just simply been, or paintings that have been manipulated to be in black and white and gray. That's all grayscale means, is that it has gray areas instead of just being stark black and white. And I'm a freak for black and white. I really like it, and I just haven't made time to do grayscale, and I probably won't. What was the other part of it?
I was just curious about white on black books.
Oh, that's a good one. There are some coloring books out there that are white lines on black paper, but the difficulty is that when you self-publish the way I do, either you can get really good quality paper for a color book, which is hard to draw on because it's slick. You can't use coloring pencils. You'd have to use gel pens or marker pens. Or the paper is kind of matte looking and it's dull and it wouldn't pop the way a white on black drawing would. It's too bad because when you see, when I do my originals, they're actually white on black. And I have to convert them when I refine them, and they're stunning looking. They're really beautiful. So it's kind of too bad that people can't see those. I don't know how other people do their white on blacks, but I haven't found a solution for that yet. So I've only produced one book that's white on black, and I'm not thrilled with it. It looks nice online, but I wouldn't buy it.
So it's really about the printing process.
Yeah.
When you get that much black, obviously I'm a former printer, and I know that, it's great if your object is saturation. But if you're trying to do anything fine and quality, I imagine it would be really difficult. So yeah. Why do you think that this adult coloring book craze is taking the world by storm? It just seems like everywhere I go, I'm seeing some version of an adult coloring book. And I actually have a coloring book that I bought back in the 80s. It was Cats. And it was a coloring book, back then when everything was kind of psychedelic.
Yeah.
That's the kind of book it is. And I saved that book. I mean, I've moved across the country about 3 times, and that book has always made the cut. Even though I only colored one thing in it. But what do you think this is all about?
Well, there's a couple of things that it's about, actually. And, you're talking about saving the book. I think people really love to acquire books. There are some people in the coloring book groups on Facebook who have literally hundreds of books. It's just amazing. How could they possibly color in all those drawings in a lifetime? It's like, oh my God. But I think that really it's about the fact that from childhood, we are told to sit down, shut up, and quit being a kid and study and memorize. And we need some fun in our lives. And it just takes the pressure off when people sit down to color. And they love it. They really love it. They get their whole families involved. They get their grandmas involved. It's incredible.
I agree. I've seen photographs online where you'll see this guy, like an older gentleman, and he might have tattoos and he's coloring. I saw one and it was a real photograph of a real man sitting beside his granddaughter. And, it was really a beautiful image to think that the coloring books can cross all lines, age and everything. So that's really cool. What do you think about the health benefits to coloring? I've heard a lot of experts quoted, saying it's a great stress reliever. What's your take on that?
Well, as I've told you before, I really don't care what the experts say. As long as the books make people happy, that's really all I care about it. And, when you're happy, you're relaxed and your body is just zinging and feeling good. And how could that be bad for your health?
I agree. I hear some beautiful birds singing in the background where you're at.
Oh, can you hear them?
Yeah. Where are you in Hawaii?
I'm on the island of Oahu.
Oh, okay. It literally sounds beautiful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Can you talk a little bit about some, coloring is highly personal, but are there any tips or ideas that you can give about coloring and maybe some good ways to color or best ways to color? That's an odd question, I know, but maybe I hope you understand what I'm trying to ask.
I'll try and answer that. It really depends on what your intentions are and your skill level. If you're a beginner, I would avoid trying to shade anything until you get comfortable, just filling in areas. And when you're comfortable with that, then you can do some of the shading that some of these colorists are doing. Some of them are just amazing. They're phenomenal with their shading. That they make the coloring book images look like stained glass or something. They're incredible. It also depends on your tools. Do you have pencils? Do you have gel pens? Do you have markers? Do you have paint? What are you using to color in the design with? Because if you're good at painting, you might be lousy at using a pencil or vice versa. So it really depends on a lot of things. Your skill level, how many pens and pencils and other things you have, what design you're coloring. If you're a beginner, don't do those really complex mandalas. Do the simpler ones so you get used to it. If you're an expert, go for it. Do all those really teeny tiny mind-bending spaces. Those would drive me crazy. Personally, I don't like to color. I like to draw. There's a lot of coloring book artists who hate coloring, which is kind of funny.
Well, that means that the person who likes to draw and hates to color, and the people who love to color but hate or cannot draw, works out. They were made for each other. So what is your favorite medium to use? Pens, pencils? What do you like to use?
You mean to color?
Yes.
I hate coloring.
So you really just draw.
I go crazy. I sit down and my mind goes nuts and it goes, I should be doing something else. I could be painting. I could be carving. I could be writing, blah, blah, blah. It's just not a relaxing exercise for me.
Oh, interesting. That is really interesting. I know that one of the things that you mentioned before is organizing the workspace and having good lighting. Why is good lighting when you're coloring or drawing so important?
Well, you got to have good light in order to see the color, in order to see the spaces. I mean, it's interesting because I saw somebody in the library the other day who was sitting in a corner and it was dark, and I was thinking, how can she read over there? So I went over and I asked her, how come you're sitting in the dark? And she looked up and she said, oh, I hadn't noticed. I think people don't notice where they are. So a hint would be, if you're right-handed, to have your light source coming from the left side, so that your hand doesn't obscure the light. Maybe people don't think about that. I think about it a lot. When I set up my easel or when I'm doing a carving, I always try to find out where the light source is in order so that I can have the best contrast or best resolution on my pages of light. Because otherwise, you're going to wear your eyeballs out. You don't want that.
That's actually good advice, because right now I have a light. I am right-handed, but my light is coming from the right side instead of the left. And I'm thinking what you just said, if I switch that, I'd probably feel better about that. What about coloring when you're coloring dark colors and light colors? Is there an order that you should be applying your colors?
Well, there is a conversation about that in painting. If you'll notice, when you go to a museum and you see all those old paintings and they're really dark?
Yes.
It's because they started out with a gray undertone. It's called grisaille, and it's a French word which means gray, and it gives you a medium background so that if you paint a dark part and a light part, all of a sudden you have something that looks 3D. And it's the same thing let me back up a little bit and then finish that thought. When those paintings were finished, since they started out with a dark color and the light colors were added on top, over time, light erosion has occurred and the light layers have disappeared. So the painting gets darker and darker and darker over time. It's the same effect when you do a coloring drawing. If you start out dark, it's really hard to add the lights because pens are transparent ink. You can't add a yellow over a black and have it look yellow. So what you do is you start out with the light colors first and you move towards the dark. And so if a painter started with light colors and moved to dark, over time, their painting would get lighter and lighter and lighter. It's the same thing, it's the same principle. You move from light to dark. It's really pretty simple.
That's good advice. So you talked about getting bored, and like you said, you don't like to color. So what do you do if you're coloring and you start to get sloppy or bored?
Well, for colorists, I would say if you get bored, stop, because the whole point is to have fun. And if you're making it into drudgery or something that's a chore, you've swayed from your purpose, which is to have fun and relax and enjoy yourself. It's not something that somebody's standing over you with a whip saying, you have to finish this in a half an hour. That's not the point. The point is just to have fun and enjoy yourself, maybe even learn a few things, how to improve your coloring. But if you get bored or if you get stuck, for heaven's sakes, put it down and go do something else.
Don't make it into a job. Do you have any other tips?
Say that again?
Do you have any other tips that you could share?
Let's see now. I would say, when you color with your pens and the paper gets wet, be really careful not to go through the paper. It's the same thing with pencils. If you're coloring really hard to make it a really solid, saturated color, be careful of the paper because some of the books have finer paper than others. So be careful not to puncture through. And before you start coloring, you might take a piece of paper from the back of the book. Most books have blank pages in the back. You can test out your colors there, try using your pen lightly and all the way through to a heavy pressure, and you can find out what colors look like on the color paper of the book, because some books have an off-white paper and some have pure white paper, so your colors are going to look different. You can test what you're doing and see how things turn out before you start coloring in the book. The other thing you can do is, now this is kind of a touchy subject for coloring book artists, because we don't want people stealing our work or selling it. You know, there's some people who actually sell their colored drawings, and that's against the law. That's not their work. So I would say go ahead and make copies on a copy machine for your own enjoyment of a drawing that you like. That way you can color it, and if you make mistakes, you can, you haven't ruined your book, and you can color it again and again. But do not share those with other people, because that's, you shouldn't be doing that.
Excuse me. Perfect segue. Let's talk about the business side of coloring books. And copyright law is something, like she said, there's a big difference between copying something for your own enjoyment that you've already purchased than trying to sell it. Excuse me. So on the business side of things, if I wanted to get into this, what would you suggest? How would I get started?
Oh my. Well, you would do a whole bunch of drawings, and you would throw them together in an order, and you would put them into some kind of software program. I use InDesign. Some people just use Microsoft Word, or OpenOffice, which is like Microsoft Word, but it's a whole lot better program. As I told you before, I consider the business side the artist's worst nightmare, because we don't want to be doing paperwork and publishing and selling and marketing. We just want to be creating. And most of the books out there are self-published, which is a whole other layer of effort, because it's really quite a hassle to put a book together. I wish coloring book colorists knew how much work it is to put a book together. It's just incredible. Some people can do it fast, some people do it slowly, but you have to do all these drawings, get them correct, put them in an order, put them into your software program, write all of the copy in the beginning, the copyright stuff, and your title and subtitle and your introduction and all the things you're supposed to have in the front. And then you've got to create your back cover and your front cover, and if it's big enough, you have a spine. It's quite a bit of work.
Yeah, there is a lot of work, and what amazes me is how long each drawing takes to create. And like you said, if you're putting 50 original pieces of art together to create one book, and then you have to make sure it meets all of the specifications to be published as a certain size. And like you said, your books, maybe they can't be put on Amazon, so you have to do the research to find the right publishing platform if you are self-publishing. So it isn't something that you just throw it together in a couple hours. I've seen many people, they try to discount how much work goes into these books. And I think you really brought that out, that it is a lot of work, more than just a couple hours here and there that you can just throw these things together.
Oh, a couple hours, I wish.
Well, like, you're very prolific. Because you said that you drew 1,200 images in 8 months. If you think about that, that's a lot of drawing and a lot of time and brain power that you put into that.
Yeah, it really is. And it's actually shorter than that. I was trying to be kind to my listener. It was it was probably more like 6 months, but I'm very prolific, and it's not like I can stop. So there are other artists who take way much more time than I do. And there are other artists who do things really quickly. They use software programs for making their mandalas, which makes it a lot easier and gives you a really clean line. So it really depends on who the artist is and what their habits are, how long it takes.
And you have done over 50 books, and not all of them, of course, have been coloring books, but that's a lot of books that you've created over the years.
Yep.
I mean, that's all I can say is, that's a lot of books to have produced. So,
well, interestingly enough, a regular Word book, text, a book in text is a lot easier to produce than a coloring book. All I have to do is write and edit. I don't have to sit there on one particular paragraph for 16 hours.
Right.
So it's not quite the long, time-intensive journey. Some of my books took a longer time, like my books on EFT and other books that were for informational, educational. But a lot of my books are just simply short, little inspiring books.
Great. So if I wanted to find out more about you and your books, where could I go?
You got a pencil and paper?
Here's the beauty. The show notes will have all of the information in clickable links. So nobody has to write down anything. They can just go to the show notes and find you. But if you want to give us a few ideas of where they can find you, that would be great.
Okay. I'll give you a couple here. For the coloring books, you could go to coloringbookqueen.com. And if you'd like to see my artwork, you could go to treatlyonart.com. And for all those books, or for most of my books anyway, you could go to treatlyonbooks.com.
Okay, sounds good. So before I let you go, is there anything that you would like to mention that maybe I forgot to ask you?
Well, we kind of went over copyright before, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to stress that there can be quite a big hoo-ha about copyrights. The big deal is that colorists are taking drawings and coloring them in and trying to sell them as their own work. This is not appropriate. And I'll tell you, there's a really big stink about it on Facebook right now. So if you're a colorist, be careful. Go ahead and copy the designs, but only use them for your own use or for a coloring party or something like that. But do not try to sell them. And on the other hand, this is something that most people don't talk about at all, even in the coloring book artist groups that I've seen. Artists themselves have to take responsibility for the fact that we're not signing our work. If you put a design out there without your signature on it or without the copyright sign, what do you expect? Of course people are going to share it and steal it. There's no attribution on it. So you've got to take your part in the game and sign it with, for instance, copyright symbol, your name, and even the year. You can leave the year off, but if you don't have that on there, you can expect to get ripped off. So take responsibility and, let's all have fun at this and not go into a big stink about, this stole my work. Well, sign it for heaven's sakes.
That's really excellent advice. And people, 99.9% of people, they're not trying to steal your work. They need to be educated on how to, number one, like you said, what the use is or what fair use is. And then, of course, as an artist, take responsibility and make sure that you tell people, hey, I did this, and I'll give you the little copyright symbol so that you understand that I am claiming that, so there's no doubt. So you've just eliminated all that doubt. When people see the copyright symbol, they know that, hey, I am claiming this work and it's mine. I really appreciate that you did emphasize that. I think that's really helpful. So, Angela, I really appreciate all the time that you've taken with me today, and I want to thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been fun and a pleasure, and I don't get to talk about these things often, so I appreciate your interviewing me. Thank you very much.
This is Tami-Patzer. Go make it a great day.
Get inspired, get motivated, light your fire, create your life. This is Creativity Sparks Journal.